I've discovered a time machine, and we're going to use it to go back in time to watch Jack Johnson, the world's first black heavyweight champion, perform.
Whoa. You're asking me to go back in time to hang out with a bunch of racist white people yelling slurs? I don't think so.
We're not going to watch him box. We're going to watch him tell his story at Hubert's Museum, a House of Oddities, 1938.
Okay. You've got a time machine, but instead of using it to kill Hitler, you want to go watch a show? Yeah, I see where your priorities are.
Look, I don't want to mess with the timeline. If we change our past, maybe Dove Weather won't exist. We can't be having that.
I see. All right, I'm down to see Jack Johnson talk about beating the snot out of Jim Jeffries. But how do you know this time machine works?
Because I've already used it to go back in time to 1998 so I can experience what it was like when the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill first dropped.
Wait a minute. Weren't you alive in 1998? Didn't you already live through that?
Yeah, I was a little kid. I wasn't paying attention to popular music at that point. And this time, I got to go to one of her concerts. Except she didn't show up.
That's what you get for not doing your research.
Oh, I did do my research. I knew she wasn't going to show up, and I got to experience the collective disappointment when she didn't. An important historical event in of itself.
All right. I'll go with you to 1938. But after that, I'm taking a solo trip to 1883. I gotta see the eruption of Krakatoa in person. You see, I've always wanted to see a volcano eruption, and that's the big one.
Papa.
Yeah, you're going a little 11 from Stranger Things there. Papa, the over under or whatever the.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the capability to do a southern accent. Maybe I should leave.
You're just that much of a Yank.
I can leave the southern accent.
I ain't never hear no southern accent.
The only southern accent I ever try is when I'm trying to be Walton Goggins in Justified and say, Rayland Givens. God damn.
That's not a southern.
I know.
Raylan Givens, goddamn.
Well, usually he says the goddamn first, actually. He's like, goddamn, Raylan Givens.
Goddamn, Rayleigh Givens. So, we are living in the year 2025.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And we are exactly, as the time of recording, 1 month into the rest of our lives, I guess.
1 month into Trump's second term.
Yeah.
Which may last longer than 4 years. I'm kind of hoping that, like, he just dies, and then it's like, okay, well, now he can't be king anymore.
Well, he will, you know,
yeah.
but looks like Father Time has favorites. So, and I kind of want to think about this in a different way. I don't want to think about it as months, maybe. I want to think about it as rounds. The first round, like in a boxing match.
Yeah.
The first round of the Trump presidency has started. And yeah, we got our ass kicked. I think in between the both of us, me, AP.
And me, Marcy.
We've lost maybe, I don't know, 70% of our rights, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
So like right now, round one goes to the other guy.
Yeah. But the thing is, as long as we get the knockout, that's all that matters.
And I'm talking about rounds, and Marcy is talking about knockouts, because we are going to talk about a comic book today.
That's right. We're talking about Last on His Feet, Jack Johnson and the Battle of the Century.
I know you love sports, and I know you love blood sports.
Yeah, Marcy, famous sports lover. Yeah, I watch sports all the time. Yeah, I definitely. The Super Bowl wasn't the first like full game of sport. Actually, I didn't even watch the full game. I was like, I don't even care about the first quarter of this.
But she goes crazy for blood sports. I walk into her apartment every once in a while and just see just bullfighting on the TV, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm sure you're trying to make me feel more comfortable, but like, I never did that stuff. I never did that stuff.
Yeah.
That's across the pond. Those are Spanish people.
Yeah, definitely. When I watch Survivor, that's the kind of sports that we're talking about. Like, I mean, look, I think you're the one who's like really into sports though, because when I come over to your apartment, there's a dog barking because of all the sports that are happening there.
Yeah. My dog is barking because the New York Jets are failing again and again and again, and he's just going wild over it.
Yeah, exactly.
We are going to talk about this comic, Last on His Feet. This is done by Youssef Daoudi. He is the artist who drew everything and colored everything. And the written part, or as mentioned here, the poetics, is by Adrian Matejka. This is kind of like a retelling, a little fictional here, a little truncated retelling about Jack Johnson, his kind of life, and very specifically this battle of the century that happened in 1910 in Reno, Nevada.
With him and Jim Jeffries, a.k.a. this white guy who's way past his prime, but who still thinks that he can win.
Yeah, who is the guy where the phrase "the Great White Hope" was first applied to. Now that's just applied to the president.
Yeah. Now it's applied to just a random, Elon Musk child that is going to take over the world eventually.
Yeah, one of his like pubescent hackers.
I saw someone that like kind of drew like a family tree for Elon Musk today, because like he's trying to like pump out as many babies as possible, and and then like Grimes was like tweeting like, someone needs to do something about my child. Elon Musk isn't answering my calls. So if that's what the Great White Hope is, then hopefully white people will eventually be screwed.
And it's a hope because it's like, it's never going to arrive. And Grimes ain't never going to see that kid again. They're on their face, just weird. Mm-hmm. And also you dig in just a little bit deeper and they're actually way weirder than you think.
Yeah.
Kind of because of this first round of the Trump presidency, I kind of was looking around for something a little more special to feel hope in. Hopecast. I've just been thinking about Jack Johnson a lot. Do you have any history with Jack Johnson?
Not really, no. I think this comic book was like the first time that I really got to know him. I don't really follow boxing outside of Rocky movies, and even there I haven't seen the latest Creed one. So yeah, like this was the first time I really got to know Jack Johnson and his story, and I really enjoyed most of this book. Like I think it does a really good job of kind of interweaving the story of this historic fight between Jack Johnson and Jim Jeffries with other parts of his life, other kind of things that either led to this fight or kind of transpired afterwards. And of course, I love seeing Jim Jeffries get the shit beat out of him. So that was fun too.
And it was quite a life. Before I kind of like jumped into the history of Jack Johnson, I only knew a handful of things. I knew he was a boxer. I knew he was in the turn of the century. I knew that he was the guy that beat the Great White Hope. I didn't know Jim Jeffries by name. And I also knew that he was just this kind of like big living guy. Someone who would be called a sport back then. And
speaking of motorsports, I mean, he basically said that he liked motorsports more than boxing. He loved to race cars. So
yeah, he was like a multifaceted man. He contained multitudes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, truly a Renaissance man.
This comic book was released in 2023. Yeah, as you said, it interweaves a lot of different things in his life, different episodes, and always coming back into the central fight of his life in Reno, Nevada, where he beat the breaks off of Jim Jeffries. There's a lot of characters in this. This happened in 1910, which is like a lot of racist characters. As you were reading it, what did you think of like the kind of the representation of that general bigotry that everybody walked around with?
Yeah, I think like we're living in an era where racist people are feeling more comfortable like going mask off. I think at the same time, like reading, because essentially 99% of the people who were at the fight were racist white people who were all rooting against Jack Johnson. And they were all like yelling slurs pretty much the entire time. I think being barraged with that, it was a little bit like this is like a metric shit ton of racism. But I think like it was easy to draw connections between that racism and the racism that like we were seeing in 2025. And I think that like it made Jack Johnson's eventual win an even more cathartic moment, because like all the white people in the audience, besides his wife Etta, who we'll get to, they were like, there's no way that Jim Jeffries loses. And it wasn't until late into the fight when they're like, shit, like he's gonna lose. Like they see Jack Johnson win and suddenly they stop being racist. They're still gonna be the incredibly shitty people, but
yeah. I don't know if it's exactly stylistically or if it was that commonplace, but it seems like the background noise of that a black person would have heard in 1910 was a slur of some sort.
Yeah, definitely.
And it makes sense. It's Jim Crow era West. There was a fuck ton of bullshit happening. If this is just the background noise, I think it did the proper job to show the kind of mental state of a singular individual like Jack Johnson would be hearing and living through regularly, not just through his day, but also at the moment it matters the most, when he's in the ring.
Yeah. And you can see like how resilient he is, and like because he's experienced so much of this, they make it clear that it still does have an effect on him. But at the same time, like he is like set on his goal of punching this guy, like dancing in the ring. The extremely racist white people in the audience, they're not gonna bring him down. He's gonna be able to rise above all of this
in a very like because I'm the guy type of way. His nickname was the Galveston Giant. He was born in Galveston. He lived there through his youth before moving up to Chicago. That's right. Chicago mentioned. Get your Malord out. He was the guy. He is the man, both in his story and in I think the story of many other people. In the ring, he talked about this mouth fight, which I mean, you know me, about some of those. Which is just like insulting each other, breaking people down psychologically.
Yeah. Because a lot of this fight was them, like, essentially holding each other, which I gotta say. Ha! Gay! But
Jack calls it dancing.
Yeah. And a lot of it is, if you think about it, the force against Jack Johnson, a lot of it is, like, verbal. Maybe not necessarily from his opponent, but, like, his audience is his opponent, too. The fact that then Jim Jeffries is like, oh, stop saying shit. Well, maybe the audience should stop saying shit.
Well, not even just the audience, but a guy in Jeffrey's corner, a guy that went by Gentleman Jim Corbett, was also shooting out slurs, insults the whole time.
Yeah. Definitely Jack Johnson has like a way with words. I think there's like a reason why he went on to like, you know, perform and like tell stories, because like he's like a good storyteller. So yeah, it makes sense that, especially with the fact that like a lot of boxing, like they were he was trying to prolong the fight for motion picture reasons, because like it has to get to a certain amount of rounds before, you know, they can like make a motion picture out of it. That's where he knew the money was from. So a lot of prolonging the fight was like the verbal part of it.
I think you're right. He's a boxer, he's a Renaissance man, and he is absolutely a storyteller. He at every point wants to tell you a story, and that is captured in this comic book. He was at all times spinning a yarn, telling people tall tales about himself and about others, and he would do it in these vaudeville performances where he was making bank. He was making money. He was making about a year's worth of salary of the common man of the time in one night, in one show. So he was rolling in it.
Yeah.
When I say he lived big, he was a big man. Like he did it. He was making money. He was banging broads. He was beating down not just the fighters of the time, but the ideas of fighters of the time. And he was doing it in a broad daylight in a time where winking at the wrong person gets you murdered.
Yeah, he loved to live extravagantly. Like, you can definitely see it in the club that he opened up. Like,
the Café de Champions.
Yeah, like every inch of that thing bled money. He was the best boxer in the world, so he made shit tons of money from that. He made money from driving. He made money from pretty much anything.
He at a couple of times in the comic, he talks about owning multiple properties or whatever, or like going to talk about being a founder in a bank. And maybe, I don't know, I didn't look too deep into that because the price for the fight against Jeffries was $100,000, and in today's money, that's about $2 million. $2 million?
That's the prize money for Survivor or Winners at War.
And there's like dozens of Jack Johnsons and Jim Jeffries in Survivor, right?
Yeah. I don't even want to think who the analogs would be. I'm going to say that Jeff Varner is the analog for Jim Jeffries, because Jeff Varner is like a big transphobe who outed someone on the show.
What the fuck?
Yeah. He was like
on camera
at a tribal council. Like he was like, "Oh, Zeke can't be trusted because he's hiding from all of you that he's trans."
What the?
Yeah.
Did Zeke confine in?
Well, we don't see everything on the show, so we don't know how Jeff Varner knew that Zeke was trans, but it was like something where Jeff Varner realized, like basically Zeke kind of blacked out in the tribal council. Luckily, the other contestants were like saying, like, how the fuck could you do this? Millions of people are going to watch this. And Jeff Probst was like, do you realize what you've done? And then they kind of just like all agreed that Jeff Varner was the person leaving that tribal. But then like Jeff Varner like eventually doubled down, partially because of the typical thing that happens where he got a lot of hate. So then he's like, oh, people hate me. That must mean that like they're the people who were wrong, and then like just like doubled down and became shittier. So yeah.
Jeff Varner was like, I just heard Zeke listening to a lot of hyper pop and spending a lot of time on Discord. I just connected So there's a lot of money that he was throwing around. And I do want to like note here that like Jack Johnson wanted to live big. He was born into a very poor family, a family of parents that literally just got out of slavery. Like they were born into slavery and they just got out of it. And he was one of 5 kids. He was very close to his mother named Tiny. And he didn't have anything, much like a lot of people didn't have anything post Reconstruction, because Reconstruction failed. Because guess what? When you let a confederacy, a rebellion just start, all based on the subjugation of people, and you just let those people hang around still, they're going to find a way to get back in business and continue to subjugate people. Our Galveston Giant saw that firsthand. I only read a little bit of him. I didn't want to like read too much of his like personal thoughts. He wrote a couple of autobiographies. One
of them he wrote in prison.
Yeah. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to like spend too much time of what is the real Jack Johnson versus what is the image that exists in our culture of Jack Johnson. Because the image of Jack Johnson is what's left. But with some of the stuff that I do know that happened, it's just sucks. He got started doing these fights called battle royales. And the comic book shows it a little bit. These were barbaric fights that white racists would put on, usually in basements and cellars and places where you can't run away from effectively. And they would blindfold black children, teenagers, to fight until one is left. And that is where Jack Johnson got his start. I mean, that sucks.
Yeah, you can see why, like, later on he's like, I don't do cellar fights. I can imagine he just didn't want to go back to that.
Yeah, and he found some sort of upward mobility through boxing. Boxing has been seen as a little bit of a low class thing. There's always this kind of story about being low born and rising the ranks of society through just fighting, being a good fighter. I mean, that's what Rocky is about. But there was also like a historical guy. His name was Tom Malinew, but he was a Virginian-born slave that found his way to England, where he became a bare-knuckle boxer, and he became famous off of that. There's paintings that I have seen of him doing that in person. So this idea of like climbing the social and economic ladder through fighting, it can be found here and in his story and in now. One thing that I do want to mention here is Jack Johnson, he called himself an original. There's this poem written in this comic book that is all about how it is not easy to be an original. And some of the historians that I saw talk about Jack Johnson would talk very similar about how he was this unique man. He was writing a story that hasn't been written, and that led to a lot of internal conflict and turmoil that sprouted in many different ways, including extravagant spending. But another way was through his relationship with Etta.
Yeah. Etta, I think probably my least favorite thing about this book is I feel like the character of Etta feels pretty thin. So Etta was his girlfriend who eventually became his wife, who eventually shot herself. The main things we get from Etta is that she loves cheering him on. She loves having sex with him. And
she loves calling him Papa.
Exactly. And that also he hit her. Those are kind of like the main things we get about her. And it definitely reminds me of like an Oscar bait movie where they have like one female character and they have a really good actress, so she's going to get nominated for an Oscar, but like the writing for her is just like so thin. I appreciated like Etta's presence in the book as like essentially the only female character besides his second wife, which she comes into play after.
And she's also even a thinner of a character.
The Etta stuff, it was like the one part of the book where I was like, ugh.
I don't know if it came out of convenience or just because two men were part of this creative process. Etta is, just a puppet for to show how great Jack Johnson is.
Like, it doesn't shy away from the fact that Jack Johnson hit her, but at the same time, I feel like because the book is kind of skipping around so much, it does like shade in a lot of character details for other people in the book. You kind of learn, you get to see Jim Jeffries, like some of his early fighting and like how he learned that like his fist was more powerful than anything else, and so he stopped being like working in other ways. But yeah, with Etta, it just there's not a lot there.
Even the guy that he beat, Tommy Burns, the guy that Jack Johnson beat to gain the title of heavyweight champion, gets a little bit more character than Etta.
Etta definitely feels like a few ticks put together. And the big part of Etta's story is that she's a white woman and that all the white men in the audience are like really angry that Jack Johnson has a relationship with her. And
not just angry. They also get like creepy. And they also mention like what they would do to her too, and it was just gross.
Yeah. Which,
historical though.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, contemporaneous.
But yeah, I would say that was probably the weakest part for me. But I know you want to talk more about the sex scenes.
Yeah, the sex scenes, but through the lens of this is a comic book and there's art here. I like material for mature audiences, or like for people that
you like freaky shit.
Yeah. None of this is explicit. None of this is X-rated. A little bit of a negative, maybe.
You wanted to see tits, ass, cock, tits.
So one of the reasons, well, I mean, that's just called a Friday night for me, baby. Hey. One of the things that Jack Johnson did a lot is also like sleep around a lot, like cheat a lot. In Chicago, there was a very famous brothel called the Livy. It was whites only, but he was able to get in there because he was rich and famous, and he did us the Romans. And actually, I learned that the people that he did get to know biblically were fired. Oh, these white women, that like they were just fired. Makes no sense to me. But I bring all that stuff up because this comic book has to make concessions that I don't like, is with the kind of having it two ways of like, oh, he was a philanderer, he was a sex haver, he was a man of nature in the ring and in the sack. And this comic book focuses a lot on the ring. The art in this comic book does not shy from violence. There's blood splatters. There are images of people getting beat. There's also grotesque images of racism. I get to the point of being like, you could show some like the cardinal side of this relationship a little bit. It just reads a lot to me as the same kind of like bullshit American sensibilities that I've kind of grown to just be bored of.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I think it would have been better if there was more sex in it, and if we got to see more skin, as it were. I think this kind of goes into one of my other critiques of the comic, in that, like, it makes sense that this is a story about a champion. So it makes sense that this would be like kind of an individualistic story. But at the same time, I would love to see more of Jack Johnson's community in it beyond just Etta. Because we know that he had a community. He lived in the south side of Chicago. Like, the thing is, champions, like, they don't come just out of nowhere. Like, it does take a community. I think, as someone who often likes to be vocally anti-individualism, I think I would have liked to see more of just the interactions that he had, even with, like, he's the only black person essentially in the entire book. Like, you get mentions of his mom, and there's like a few other things here and there, but really that's about it.
There is no other main black character. Yeah. And in real life, Jack Johnson would go through managers and collaborators a lot. Boxing is kind of seen as a little bit of it's a sport of lies and cheating and fixing matches. There's like a sense of this is underground for a reason, because it's filled with like mafia shit, crime. In this comic, one of his friends, Ketchel, tries to do him in a fixed match where he was supposed to lose.
Yeah, but then he's like, I'm not having this, and that's when he takes out some of Ketchel's teeth.
Jack Johnson lived the type of life where he would keep people away.
I mean, I would at least have liked to see more of that.
But yeah, this is fiction, right? Like, effectively, this is a fictional story, right? So why? It's not like if he didn't have a black community in the South Side.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder why that they wrote the story in that way.
You were telling me that about the opening of the Café des Champions.
Yeah, like the Chicago Tribune article said that, everyone was there. Basically, all the black people in Chicago, except for 7 people, were at the opening, is what the joke was.
Which is like, I believe it. I mean, I believe it. Like Jack Johnson was living a life that was not common. So yeah, there was like this rallying around him, and that rallying around him has gone through literally the centuries since the fight of the century. This is such an individualistic story, even though you might say, "Oh, boxing is individualistic," but there's no such thing.
Yeah.
There's coaches, there's assistants, there's the people that like maintain the arena.
Yeah, as per usual, the workers make the world.
My biggest critique is, who is this for? I can't tell you who this comic is for. This came out in 2023. It was worked on since the 2000s by the team. There is a kind of a telling of an America that, or a sentiment about America that I don't know if it's as strong as it's being portrayed. There's this
Yeah, so basically, Jack Johnson likes to say that America is a land of freedom, and there's this moment where his second wife, this is after they've fled America because of some trumped up charge they're trying to throw at him, and he's like, I gotta go back, and his second wife is like, why? Look what they tried to do to you, and he's like, America is a land of freedom, and he's like, America isn't just isn't just those people. Like, America is me too.
And they were saying that in France, which I have no love for France. But France, there was this a couple of decades later, James Baldwin left New York for Paris. In the way that he said it, is that he left so he could think. So his mind wasn't completely battered around with the background noise of racism everywhere. This is also true for a couple of other black figures that I can mention. But this comic doesn't do that.
I mean, obviously we have Louis from Interview with a Vampire. Yeah, there's a few characters who have gone to France.
I don't know who this is for. I don't know who this version of the land of the free type bullshit is for. Part of this comic book in the story of Jack Johnson is this idea of the Great White Hope. Did you have any relationship to the idea of the Great White Hope?
That was like a phrase I'd heard a lot. I don't think I'd ever really thought about where it came from before I read this comic.
That phrase came from a guy named Jack London, who is a writer in the turn of the century. Very well known. He might share some point of views about workers and laborers that we do, but he was just a racist. Uh-huh. And he came up with this idea of the Great White Hope to describe Jim Jeffries. Jim Jeffries, by the time of the fight of the century, was retired for 5 years. He was older, and a year before the fight was supposed to happen, he weighed over 300 pounds. He was a farmer. He drank a lot. He was just fat. He was out of shape.
Yeah, basically he had a very high opinion of himself, which is the only reason why he agreed to do this fight. Like, anyone who was sane would know, like, no, you're gonna get your ass whooped.
And he was trying to uphold this idea of the color line, of not mixing with black athletes in the ring.
Yeah, because the idea is they didn't want to have a black champion, and so if they upheld the color line by just never fighting a black boxer, then they wouldn't have to worry about it.
And by this time, there was actually a lot of fights in between black and white boxers, but in the other weights below heavyweight. So heavyweight was kind of the last space where this idea of white dominance in the boxing world was staying.
Yeah, and basically Jack Johnson had to chase down multiple of these white guys to get them to box him, like going like country to country, following them, being like, "Come on, fight me." And it really seems like the only way he got them to fight him is by embarrassing them.
He did. The guy that he embarrassed in Sydney, Tommy Burns, a Canadian, got smacked by Jack Johnson to gain this the heavyweight title. Jim Jeffries was seen as the only guy that could maybe uphold this idea that there's this supremacy that can be upheld. And Jack London was part of this. There's a very famous line that Jack London wrote when he described the fighting between Jack Johnson and Tommy. It goes along the lines of, he is a white man and so am I. Naturally, I wanted to see the white man win. He actually then goes on to give Jack Johnson a little bit of some roses, where he says, because a white man wishes the white man to win should not prevent him from giving absolute credit to the best man who did win, even when that man was black. I mean, it's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow when you're kind of trying to look for a great white hope.
Yeah, essentially, like, I would say 98% of the white characters 1% of the white characters in this are Edda, but the 97% of them are completely 100% racist, and then 1% of them are, like, very racist, but then every once in a while they'll say, like, a few nice things about Jack Johnson.
Or they're just trying to make money.
Yeah.
And they have no reason to, like, antagonize. Mm-hmm. The guy that put this fight, Tex Rickard, was probably one of those guys. Mm-hmm. Jack London, though, he went on to write a book after this fight called The Abysmal Brute, where it's like a telling of, it's kind of like a morality tale about this perfect fighter finding this perfect woman and just living a life that is all American. In that book, in the first chapter, literally 6 paragraphs into this book, Jack London writes, talk about the hope of the white man. This is him, which is Pat Glendon, which is the main character. Come and take a peep when you was managing Jeffries, you was crazy. This line is about the dad of Pat trying to get this coach to come coach Pat. But in literally 6 paragraphs in, a year after the fight of the century, Jack London shoots out this shout out to Jeffries, even though the Jeffries lost.
Yeah, Jeffries got made a fool of completely, and yeah, you know, it's almost like this idea of this great white hope. Like, Jack London can't let go of it completely. He's like, I need this.
As I was reading around, trying to like figure out why, I found this guy, Scott Emmerich, and he wrote this very interesting paper on Jack London and this idea of the Great White Hope. And he kind of brings it down to a one-sentence explainer. He says, it created a larger-than-life white boxer, the Great White Hope, to comfort his white readers by relieving anxieties that undermine their self-image. This was the exercise of Jack London. First, you create the idea of a Great White Hope with Jim Jeffries. Oh, Jim Jeffries, apparently he sucks. But you know what? In my mind, I could write a guy that could be Jack Johnson.
Yeah, definitely like a way where media is trying to imitate real life, but then when real life doesn't uphold your preconceived notions, you try to create media that like kind of becomes this propaganda of what you actually want.
So much of that we see today in this idea of a parallel entertainment system for the type of losers that are in power today, I guess. The kind that says, you are seen, you're heard, you're loved. Oh, let me hold you. Oh, you're not a repulsive weirdo.
Yeah, I think like this definitely connects with the Trump administration trying to get rid of all DEI, where they're trying to essentially create a world where white people are like always on top. And you see this both like in media where like racists get angry when people of color are even on their TV.
One of the ways that I always remember this is there were some ads that came out like 8 years ago that for Cheerios that involved this mixed race couple. People online were going, like the biggest babies online were going hog wild because they saw a black man and a white woman in a relationship in a cereal ad.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, different words have been used to like describe this over time, but like, a few years ago, like woke was the watchword. Like get all this woke stuff off my screen. And now I feel like it's DEI. Like, they're trying to get rid of all the DEI. And yeah, I really enjoyed as we were kind of reading this. You kind of hit on something that I think is really, really smart about how there's parallels between like the racism that Jack Johnson experienced and then the transphobia that trans people are experiencing in sports today. And I think there's so many parallels between 100 years ago, actually even more than 100 years ago, and now. And I think that this comic book just kind of made it feel like more potent, where it's like the white supremacist capitalist system is continuously trying to erase anything that isn't like the white male, like what they view as the normality, and they're going to continue doing it in whatever ways possible as long as they can.
We can see it because we've lived this. What is happening today happened 100+ years ago. It's called segregation.
Yeah.
It's just segregation. Like Jamel Bowie, the New York Times columnist, put me on this. What is happening now is just trying to get back to this idea that segregation should be the way that things are. There should only be a certain type of person in power, in positions of power, in positions of notoriety. Everyone else should be either in the gutter or subservient or dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw Jamel Bowie posting on Bluesky today about how Matt Iglesias was trying to like twist Jamel Bowie's words to mean something that they weren't. Like that Matt Iglesias was trying to be like, oh yeah, according to this, everyone, if you're not like 100% for DEI, then like you're a segregationist. And Jamel Bowie was specifically talking about like how the right-wing people in power, like the reason why they're against the DEI is because they're trying to segregate society. And it's very easy to see like how whether you call it this like the center, the liberal pundits are, and this goes along with like the Democrats' response to all of this, where a lot of it is just sit on their hands and like post something must be done, this is illegal, but like,
or be geriatric and yelling we will win
at
some building
and try to,
outside of some building,
try to fundraise more for the DNC and all this stuff. And yeah, it's like the system is set up so that when the right wing like actually tries to do segregation, that there isn't a meaningful response from the rest of the government.
They're just letting it happen.
Yeah.
They open the door. I'm always reminded of the first words out of Joe Biden's mouth on January 20th. As Trump was walking into the White House, he said, "Welcome home." Ugh. It's segregation. I mean, Jim Crow Joe loves segregation. So, of course, I don't really want to jump into like all the troubles and all the bullshit that segregation had. Not because I can't, but because there's better information out there than what I can provide here. What I will say is that after the fight of the century, there was some race riots. And over a course of a year, 60, 70 people got murdered, lynched, attacked all over the country just because this black man won. It sucks. And thank you for bringing up the trans stuff, because I want to mention the segregation in sports exists today. The segregation of gender has existed in sports. There is this belief that there needs to be this division in between men and women in sports for, I don't even know, for fairness. Like, I've read a lot about trying to understand why it exists, but there is no answer that isn't just men can't accept that a woman is better than them. Just like a racist can't accept that a black person's better than them.
What's been happening over the last few years, like trans people compete and then people get really mad, and then they're like, oh, they shouldn't, they say transphobic things, say that the athletes aren't the gender that the athletes are, and then ban them. And the idea that a trans woman shouldn't be able to compete with other women is ridiculous. And like something that we've talked about is like, just because, okay, I'll make it about me. I'm a trans woman and I'm terrible at sports. I will lose to any gender. So the idea that like, oh, because you're a trans woman, you shouldn't be allowed to compete with other women is just ridiculous.
It doesn't make sense because there's no such thing. There's no broad category that can indicate how well you are at a sport, whether it's gender or height. Nothing. None of it exists. There is no way of knowing who will be good at a sport unless they prove that they're good at that sport. One of the ways that I hate seeing the segregation happen is, trans people shouldn't be able to compete and whatever. I don't even start there. I don't think there should be a damn line.
Goddamn Raylan Givens.
I don't think there should be a goddamn Raylan Gibbons line that should separate people playing sports, whether it's gender or race. There should be no lines. There should be nothing.
I feel like if AP is put in charge of like sports, there will be riots by every race and every gender because like people will be like, no way, we need to have WNBA has to be free of men. I don't want to see any men on TV. I just want to see my queer women play basketball.
Over the last couple of decades, there has been more funding added to women's sports. And when there is enough funding added to women's sports, where there's also this larger media broadcast force behind it, people like it. 10 years ago, the WNBA was a joke. People would just use that as a punchline. Now we live in a world where Angel Reese exists, where Caitlin Clark exists, and where people are buying tickets to go see them.
Yeah, and where we have like unrivaled league where the players have like co-ownership of it.
And so I want to bring up something here. Do you know who Leah Thomas is?
Yes.
Leah Thomas is a swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you know about her?
Trans.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an outrage. There's an uproar about what happened.
What happened was she is the first trans woman to ever win an NCAA college Division I medal. And this was in the 500-yard freestyle. And there was so many people with repulsive energy. The energy of a bag of dog shit. Angry that this happened. Do you know, this happened in 2022, a year before this comic book came out. Do you know her standing in the ranks that year? You want to take a guess?
49.
All right, no solidarity amongst trans women. All right. She was 32nd. She was the 32nd best NCAA women's swimmer. In America, no one gives a fuck about 32nd place. They only care about number one.
Yeah. So the fact that there's that much outrage just shows that people wanted to get angry. They were looking for something to get angry
It's
about.
manufactured.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like every year you see something like this, you see like an outrage about a trans athlete. So much so that like I lose track of all the trans athletes that this has happened to. And yeah, this kind of goes into something else that I know we wanted to talk about, which is the idea of the cis hope. The idea that in the same way that there could have been a great white hope in Jim Jeffries to stop Jack Johnson, the idea that there can be a cis athlete that can stop the trans athletes. And I think for many reasons, that's not really possible, partially because trans people, we love to do so many different things. There's a reason why there's been so many trans athletes who there's been big media stories about, because like, hey, trans people, we're talented. We can do shit. Not just sports, but all kinds of different shit. We can make podcasts. We can star in TV shows. We can go to space. We can do anything.
Yeah.
So you can't stop.
Wait, there's been a trans astronaut?
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
But
damn.
They're only out to fellow trans people, so I can't tell you.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess I'm not an ally, So the Great White Hope exists, and I think the Great White Hope right now is Donald Trump, just categorically.
Yeah.
And I think there will never be a Great Cis Hope. So the Great White Hope was Jim Jeffries coming in to defeat this black man that took the heavyweight championship. And I think there will never be a Great Cis Hope because the segregationists that exist now and are in power now don't ever want to give a trans person a chance to do what Jack Johnson did and get a major title in some sport. Do you know who the number one woman swimmer is in the United States right now?
Would that be Katie Ledecky?
Yeah, it is Katie Ledecky. Katie Ledecky is cis. And I hate doing this shit. I hate doing this shit. I'm also cis. It's my culture. I could say cis, right?
Yeah.
But I hate doing this shit. I hate splitting these like major athletes like this. It's so dumb. She is cis, but is she the Great Cis Hope? No.
No.
In the first round of the Trump presidency, he signed a executive order. That executive order is called Keep Men Out of Women's Sports. And in it has a certain language that goes over many things. But it kind of starts with this. It says, in recent years, many educational institutions and athletic associations have allowed men to compete in women's sports. This is demeaning, unfair, and dangerous to women and girls, and denies women and girls the equal opportunity to participate and excel in competitive sports.
Which is kind of ridiculous, the idea that Trump cares about, like, the well-being of women and girls, especially given, like, who the people are that are joining his cabinet. There's so many articles about, like, these are all the sexual assault allegations against all of the people who are in Trump's cabinet.
Truly, one of the prerequisites to be in Trump's cabinet is having some sexual assault allegations.
Yeah. So we already know that this is bad faith.
But he is making sure that segregation lives. And it's taken effect. The same people that oversaw Leah Thompson and Katie Ledecky when she was a college athlete. The NCAA, those weak-willed little bitches, immediately caved to this executive order. And an executive order is not law. It is not a decree from the Lord above. It is just a memo that some dork wrote.
Yeah, I feel like that's like one of the most dispiriting things about the last month is that, you know, Trump has signed all these executive orders, and a lot of like corporations have been like, okay, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll just lie down and do whatever the fuck Trump says.
Here, I have the policy right here. I'm not going to read it, but there's two major items here. Can you tell the audience what they're...
Yeah, well, we have the men's team and we have the women's team. And essentially, the women's team has a lot more rules than the men's team.
About 3 times more.
Yeah.
3 times more words.
They had, you know, they're like, this is what should happen for student athletes that sign male at birth. This is what should happen for athletes that sign female at birth. And of course, they have like multiple numbers underneath both of those.
As I said earlier, there's no broad category that can indicate who's good at sports. And if you are... But this is written by like people missing 2 brain hemispheres. So they think just because someone is AMAB, they might be stronger than someone that is AFAB. Or the converse of that.
Yeah.
But check this out. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's... Look, you are not going to be able to draft me in any sport because of what gender I was assigned at birth. Guaranteed. So they better keep that nonsense logic out of there.
I don't think we've played any sports together, but I think we played kickball once. And honestly, I don't remember you showing up.
Well, that's because I was taking pictures of the kickball because I didn't want to be in that.
No wonder. No wonder this girl can't even kick a ball.
Exactly.
Unlike me, Latino, Mexicano. Oh, I can kick a ball here. I can kick a ball here, señora.
So what I'm hearing is that gender can't decide whether you're good at sports, but apparently race can now.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Uh-huh.
This is what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
There's no easy way of knowing who the fuck's good at sports.
Yeah.
And this is why, like, Katie Ledecky isn't the Great Cis Hope. And there will never be a Great Cis Hope.
Yeah, your point about how like society segregates trans people so that like no trans person will ever rise. You know, one of our favorite topics is Amelia Perez, and of course, the trans actress, our friend Carla. You know,
Carla Gascon.
she said some really stupid, idiotic, racist things.
The type of racist shit where it feels like it should be written down on a comic book about a fight 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So on the one hand, like, I think, you know, the criticism that she's received, like, is all warranted. But at the same time, the way that the whole storyline is making it seem like, oh yeah, she's the bad person. She's the person who we need to, you know, make sure never says anything again. But then it's like the French director. Oh no, he can keep saying whatever he wants. Like, he's fine. It really makes you think about like, oh yeah, you know, trans person who says something dumb, we gotta throw all the shit on her immediately. But this cis guy who said stuff that honestly is like equally stupid, no, he's fine. He's fine.
I would go further and say that Carla said some anti-Asian shit in those tweets. Jackie's, he didn't just do some anti-Asian shit in Emilia Perez. He got paid to do some anti-Asian shit. For Netflix and him to like sideline Carla in the kind of the 4-year consideration campaign is fucked, because this is Netflix, the company that destroyed a whole industry, who made money off of racism.
The director of Amelia Perez is talking about how like, oh yeah, well, you know, I didn't really do any research about Mexico. I didn't feel like I needed to. Like, you know, he basically like continuously doesn't treat Mexican people as people, and that's the definition of racism.
I am a person. Je suis Mexicain and je suis un homme.
Es la verdad.
Was that French?
My Spanish is so bad that it sounds like French. Yeah.
Ay caramba.
You know, this was a story about a man who he had a lot going on against him, Jack Johnson, and he won. He won against the racists. He won against the color line. He won against the president, Theodore Roosevelt. And, you know, if he can win, we can win. And I want to segue into Hopecast. And I know that you have something that's very relevant to Jack Johnson that's giving you hope. So I'll start with you.
Yeah, Jack Johnson is the thing that's been giving me hope. He is someone who delivered a new way of existing in a time where nobody wanted to see it. And he did it with gusto, with flavor, with every imperfection that was required of someone to go beyond the actual threat of violence directed at him 24/7. He wasn't the perfect man by any means, but he was he didn't accept the shit that was happening around him. He just lived. He lived big, and I like that. That provided me a lot of hope during this flurry of executive orders that just seem out of nowhere, and all the trouble that is arising, all the slashing of the institutions that exist. that I'm not even a fan of, as much as I understand that they're needed for the day to day that I have known my whole life. And so I just like how Jack Johnson has been saying since day one that he is here, he is gonna live, no matter who is saying no, you can't. And I like that.
Yeah. I like that too. I'm glad that Jack Johnson has been able to give you some hope. I think for me, what's given me hope is other people in 2025. People who have been standing up both for trans people, for immigrants, for people of color. And I know you went to a protest recently that was a protest of a hospital that was trying to stop care for trans people. And I haven't always myself had the energy to go to protests recently. So I think knowing that people that people will take the baton when I'm not able to has been giving me hope. And I think there's been some things in my personal life that I won't talk about in the podcast that have been giving me hope as well. Some real cool trans shit. And I think that I like that I'm able to do some things for myself, some gender affirming things, and know that I'll be able to defend my fellow trans people after I'm done with that and give other people a chance to focus on their gender affirming care as well. So that's what's giving me hope.
Nice. There's hope to be found. So thank you for listening. This is Dove Weather. You can find us everywhere where you can connect to the internet, because we are on Instagram.
And you can listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. You can skeet about us on Bluesky. We're Dove Weather there as well. And don't forget to give us a review. Give us 5 stars so that we can afford even more things on the soundboard like this. And yeah, we'll be seeing you again soon. And thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.